Welcome to Experts Unleashed, a podcast that aims to uncover how professionals and entrepreneurs transform their experience into income while making a positive impact in the world. I'm your host, Joel Irway, and over the past 4 years, I've helped entrepreneurs develop and launch their expert-based businesses to grow past 6 and 7 figures per year. Now, a professional expert serves their community through paid training, education, or service, and this podcast will show you how to design and execute your plan to become a 6 or 7 figure expert without a big team. So, let's get started. What's going on, experts? Joel here with another episode of Experts Unleashed, and oh boy, you guys are in for a very special treat today. I just hopped off my interview with Elaine Pofeldt, who is the author of the book, The $1 Million One-Person Business. Now, Elaine is an independent journalist who specializes in small business entrepreneurship and careers. We hopped on this interview because I wanted her to explain what it really meant to be a one-person business, right? We went through the definition and how businesses are growing past the $1 million mark and how many actually do. And it's a very, 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 very small percentage of the total number of small businesses in America today. And so I wanted to figure out really why, if anyone even wants to get to that $1 million mark, and specifically what industries can quickly take you there. We made a little bit of a pivot during the conversation because I really wanted to understand, do people even really want $1 million business? And we talked about something that was really, really fascinating. We went down a very relatable rabbit hole that I know that you are going to love. And so without further ado, I want to jump into today's interview for you because anyone who is in the kind of startup phase or just kind of growing, it's important to really get central on your ideas for why you want this business, what you want this business to become for you. So without further ado, let's jump into today's episode. Elaine, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Joel. I'm so excited to be here.
So I was stalking you a little bit, obviously, as a great host should do, and doing some research on what it is that you do. And I found you're a Forbes contributor, and I was reading a couple of your articles. So I'm fascinated in your ideas and your systems and your methodologies, the things that you teach your customers and your followers. But do us a favor and introduce yourself real quick and tell my listeners what it is that you do. What is your specialty? What does your business do?
Sure. Well, I am a journalist. I've been a journalist who covers entrepreneurship for many years. I was a senior editor at Fortune Small Business Magazine. And then 10 years ago, I went freelance. And since then, I've written for a number of publications, Money, Fortune, Inc., CNBC, and a host of others, including Forbes. I don't know if I just said that, but that's my area of careers and entrepreneurship. And I'm also the author of a book that just came out in January called The $1 Million One-Person Business. That book came out of my Forbes coverage and coverage for other publications. I came across U.S. Census Bureau statistics showing that there was an uptick in the number of firms that were breaking 1 million in revenue with no employees. There was a 33% increase from 2011 to 2015, and there are now close to 36,000 of these businesses. Now, that's a drop in the bucket compared to the probably 22 million non-employer businesses. That's what the Census Bureau calls them, by the way, non-employer businesses. But I thought we can all learn from them because they're doing something right. I, as a freelancer, know a lot of freelancers, and they're not breaking 1 million. So I thought, let me dig a little deeper, find out who they are, what they're doing, and let me share that with other people in the entrepreneurial community and see what we can all learn from them. So that's kind of what I've been up to lately.
Okay, great. So you said there's 30,000 businesses that fit this mold of the $1 million one-person business. They're breaking $1 million in revenue with no employees, right?
It's about close to 36,000 now. It's gone up every year that I've been able to track it. So it's something where I think technology is enabling people to really amplify what they're doing. And I think I'm very excited because the numbers are coming out at the end of May. I'm a complete geek about these numbers. And I really I'm curious if they're going to keep going up this year. We'll see. But they usually come out around the last week of May. So I'm just going to be bugging the Census Bureau until I see them.
So that's fascinating. So 36,000 businesses that are breaking $1 million in revenue with no employees. What is the average yearly revenue that a small business makes in America?
I don't have the number for employer businesses off the top of my head, but for non-employer businesses, it's about 49,000.
49,000. So for those who are basically working for themselves, that would be, same category, right? Just
freelancers, consultants, et cetera. Now, the one thing we don't know is how many hours they're putting in. So those figures might include people that have a side gig, but I can't find that out from the census statistics. So there may be some people that just have some small business that maybe is even a borderline hobby that are pulling that number down. But that's actually, when you think about it, the median U.S. income is about 59,000. So it's probably not too far off from what they're really making, but it is lower than the median income.
Yeah. So how many, give me a range here, how many non-employee businesses are there? So we've got the numbers, 36,000 are at that $1 million plus mark, but the average is 49,000. What's the sample size? What's the total pool?
Well, the total pool of non-employer businesses is it's in the range of 22 to 23 million, right?
In the United States?
Yeah. So this is a small percentage. These are the elite in terms of maxing out what you can do in a non-employer business. There's about 28 million small businesses. I don't have all these numbers right in front of me, so you'll have to fact check this, but it's about 22 to 23 million are non-employers, right? So this is it's just a handful.
Yeah.
These are the outliers.
That's far less than 1%.
Yeah. So what's interesting though is that their numbers are growing. And that's what I think the real story is. Why? What are they doing differently? And the things that I've found out from reporting the book and other stories, I've probably interviewed about 50 entrepreneurs in this category at this point. And I've been doing some panel discussions around the book with some of the entrepreneurs to find out even more, because your reporting is never done when you're a reporter. You always wonder, is there a little more to the story? The things I concluded after interviewing them they're different because, one, they focus a lot more on automation than most people do. They really don't do a lot of inefficient things in their business. They are very efficiency-minded people. They don't try to do everything themselves. So while they're non-employer businesses, as far as how they pay their taxes, they're not doing their own website. They're not doing their own books. They're outsourcing that to freelancers. And then with some of the businesses that really have a labor-intensive element, like the e-commerce stores, that's a very hot area, by the way, for people who really want to generate high revenue. They are using things like fulfillment by Amazon. And there are other types of outsourced services that they might use, like back office. So there's one entrepreneur in the book, Harry Ein. He's a young dad, likes to do coaching with his son, runs this business from his garage. He brings in $4 million in annual revenue a year. He's profitable. And he uses a service aimed at swag sellers like him. He sells those tote bags that have a bank's name on them, that sort of thing, to enterprise clients. I Promote You, this back office service he uses, does all his invoicing and that sort of thing. And as he scaled the business, he uses more hours from I Promote You. So there's sort of a hidden army behind them, but those people are not employees. And that gives them the flexibility to max out the money they have to invest in the business. Because as you know, if you mentioned you're scaling up, if you run payroll, you've got to pay taxes on the salaries, you've got to maybe provide benefits, and you might not have the cash flow to support it. Maybe on an annual basis, you bring in X amount, but there might be some months of the year where you bring in very little, but you still have to pay the employees. So in the early days of a business, by using help only when you need that help and not creating make work for people because they're on payroll, you are able to grow the business and reinvest. And then when you finally do hire employees, if you choose to do that, then you're in a strong financial position where you have money in the bank to insulate you. You're not going to miss payroll if something goes wrong, like a client doesn't pay you. That's very important. I think, none of them seem to be against scaling. People sometimes when I was fact checking people, when I ask them if they're still non-employer businesses, they'd be like, no, Elaine, I'm so sorry. I hired an employee. And I'm like, this is awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah.
I'm not against hiring employees, but I am against hiring them when you can't afford to do it.
Right.
And when you can't do it right, like you really shouldn't, if you need a web designer once a year to do your web redesign, they shouldn't be on payroll. That's a freelance project. And you need to, as a good entrepreneur, it's important to be able to distinguish those things.
My math skills have diminished over the years since I've been in school. I ran the numbers on like what the percentage was of people who crossed the $1 million mark, non-employee businesses versus total number that exists. It's 0.16%. So that means it's 36,000 over 22 million, right? So 0.16% ever crossed that $1 million solopreneur, solo person mark, which I think is amazing. I mean, it's fascinating to think about that.
These are the Olympic athletes of the one person business.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's a lot we can all learn from them. And I have to say, they've been so generous in sharing what works for them. And that's been the beauty of working on this book was, when I do corporate reporting, the CEOs are so close to the vest. They want to let out any information their competitors can use. But these entrepreneurs recognize that they're small, have a very specific niche. They realize no one can be exactly like them, and they really lean into that strength, and they don't worry about sharing information freely. That's my conclusion. It's not like they're Apple battling its competitors. They don't see themselves that way, and they're very community minded. I think, being solo, as you are too, right? It's like, I get so much energy from going out and meeting other people that are running businesses, because sometimes in our communities, we're surrounded by people with traditional jobs, and you feel kind of like an outlier, and then you connect, you're like, oh, these people are doing the same thing I am.
Technically, I'm not solo. I do have one employer, but she's my wife. So I don't know if that would count. But essentially you're an ultra lean business, and it's like you're in your home running your business, or in your office. I'm not sure where you work, but it's nice to get out and meet other people. And I really felt that spirit with them. They enjoy connecting with other entrepreneurs. Yeah. And there is this mentality of this community where you said it yourself, we are open-minded, and there are lots of bloggers out there and podcasters too that are coming to my mind right now, Pat Flynn and John Lee Dumas, where they produce monthly income reports, and they would say, here's how much we made, here are our expenses, and they're just fully transparent. And I think that mentality helps drive the spirit of entrepreneurship, because there is so much opportunity out there, right? This podcast is all about opportunity and being able to see what's really out there. So I totally support that. Now, you talked about something that I wrote down. It was called "I Promote You." What was that? You were going through and you're talking about automation, and was that a service called "I Promote You"?
Back office service. It wouldn't apply to all the businesses of the listeners to your show, because it's specific to the swag sellers.
Got it. Okay.
I made the point because there are services tailored to individual industries that handle back office. There was another entrepreneur in the book, Chris Cadigan, who ran a Unishippers franchise, right? You think you have to do everything uniformly in a franchise, but he found a back office service that handled the reception and the phone work and that sort of thing for his industry, grew the business to 1 million as a one-person franchisee. Then he acquired the back office service and now provides that to other people. And now he's scaled up, but that's what enabled him to really step on the gas and build up his revenues. The other thing I should say is revenues are not the only measure of your business success. You can be running at a loss at 1 million in revenue. And so I focus on the folks that were profitable. I think it's important to recognize that when you're bringing in 1 million in revenue, depending on your cost, probably what's going to end up in your pocket is like 200,000 to 400,000. So it's not like you're making millions. You're making a very good, comfortable income that you can live on pretty much anywhere in the US without stress.
Well, I know in the e-commerce space, like it's really, if I were to pick one niche, and maybe you can speak to this because this is where my next question was going. But in my mind, different entrepreneurs that I've spoken to, I see the e-commerce niche is like fastest growth. Like if you start from,
undoubtedly, yeah. For the $1 million one person business, it's eclipsing all the others. I'm seeing people getting to like 3 to 4 million with no employees.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
amazing because you can just if you have something that's working, then you just amplify it, and you don't always, if you use drop shipping and systems like that, you don't have to have all the money up front. So a very lean business can get into that, but it's also competitive, and the advertising costs are very high now. So that's where the profitability equation comes in a little bit. You've got to, if you're doing Facebook ads or you're advertising internally in Amazon, you've got to be pretty good at doing the math of, is this paying off, and measuring the return. Sometimes they'll bring in an outside consultant to do the Facebook for them, so they're not wasting a lot of money, because you can literally spend over $100,000 a year just on that.
On Facebook, right?
Yeah. And it pays off. Oh, okay. So
I do.
okay, so yeah. So you have to figure out how profitable that allows the business to be. Sometimes people might say it's better to keep the sales smaller, keep the profit margin higher, because in the end, it's a business, right? You might love your business, but you want to have some money left over to reinvest, to live your life, to go on vacation. And so you have to, and it's an ever-changing thing. You can't, it might be working for you 1 month. That's what I hear a lot with the e-commerce sellers. Things are going along great, and then some new competitor comes into the mix, and then they've got to raise their game, or people are cribbing their ads or doing all kinds of things. So it's something where you can't just relax and be like, okay, it's all set up and I'm fine for life. In real time, you've got to be involved.
So through all of your research, like into this industry and into this book, what was the one biggest surprise? Like someone who you interviewed where it's like, wow, like I had no idea that this had the potential to be $1 million one-person business.
Well, probably the biggest surprise for me was manufacturing can be a one-person business, because we think of manufacturing as owning a factory, or you're really renting a very expensive facility that most one-person businesses could not afford. But I'm seeing a lot more with that, mostly in the food industry, due to co-packing.
Really?
Yeah. One couple in the book, Rebecca Crain and Luis Zavalos, they're from California. Her father is a beekeeper, and they created a business selling the honey from his beekeeping business, because he sells the bees to commercial farms. And they use a co-packer. They're a couple with young children, probably under age 4 right now. And they want a lot of flexibility to live their life with their family. And so by using the co-packer, they completely outsource the putting the honey in the containers and the labeling and all that stuff that would be quite a hassle to figure out, I think, as if you're not a manufacturer, and they weren't before. And they have a nice little business doing that. I interviewed another entrepreneur recently who was a nurse. She's a neonatal nurse, and she was doing some volunteer work with moms who just had babies, with coaching them on lactation. And so she came up with a nutrition bar for them. And my kids always say I shouldn't say this name on the air, but they're called booby bars, and they're in Walmart, so I think it's probably PG rated, right? So she outsourced the manufacturing to a plant like this, a co-packer, so they were properly labeled, and she can market it as a one-woman business operating from her home, a mother with 3 kids, no business experience whatsoever. She's a nurse, right? She got to 1 million. She actually went on Shark Tank too. And I think that is so surprising and incredible, because in one way you think, okay, well, these are not jobs that the person is creating in manufacturing, but who works for the co-packer? There's jobs in the co-packer, right? So it's invigorating manufacturing, but it's also empowering people who have a great product idea to go for it. There's some complexity to it. This came up on a panel that I organized at the 92nd Street Y last night, where there are quality control things you need to pay attention to. One of the entrepreneurs in the book, Alan Walton, runs Spy Guy, an online spy camera store. And he started manufacturing his own products. And he said, there's a lot to it. He's doing electronics. Things might not work. So you've got to be quite involved with the factory and, all that aspect of it. So it's not something to go into lightly, but it does make it accessible. And there, some great resources now. Makers Row is a site where you can find all the people that you need to do the manufacturing. Some people go on Alibaba as well. I think Alibaba is a little bigger and more complex. So often what I'll see with that is people will enlist a consultant to help them vet the factories that they find on there, because it's huge. If you've gone on it, there's so many resources on there.
Yeah. So did you ever come across anyone through these interviews and through this research who they hit their stride, they hit success, and they were growing, and they knew they had a lot more potential, but they deliberately didn't grow anymore because if they did, they would have to grow larger than a one-person business? Did you ever find that through your research?
Yeah, absolutely. One example, and it's actually quite common, where people who start these businesses want a lifestyle business, but they just don't want the stress of being a marginal lifestyle business. So they'll take it as far as they can go as one person, and then they stop and just enjoy keeping it, as a high quality boutique business. So Jason Gignard is a good example. He's a Toronto.
I just met Jason on Monday.
Met him. He's a wonderful guy. He had Tickets Canada, a scalable business. I think it was about 20 employees, grew it, but he was miserable, had cash flow issues, and in the end wound up closing that business. And he started another business, Mastermind Talks, which is doing incredibly well. It's these elite meetings of entrepreneurs. You have to apply to go to the event. It's a carefully curated event in terms of the guests list. He puts a lot of thought into who sits next to whom. And he decided that he was making enough money. He takes a certain amount out of the business, and that's good. He has a young daughter who likes to spend time with her. And he realized that profits don't scale in tandem with revenue. And so what he found is his business is very profitable the way it is. If he were to scale it, if the way he did with Tickets Canada, it might not be. And he just doesn't see the need to do that. And he has a podcast called Community Made, where he's talked a lot about the decisions that led to this great podcast. And I think it'll be a good thing for people to listen to who feel the pressure to scale in the Silicon Valley way, but their heart is telling them, I don't want that. Maybe I take, 300,000 out of the business. I have a great life. I have time to work out. I have time to see my family and friends. I have time to travel. Life is good. I don't need to have all the responsibilities that come with a scalable business. Other people feel like, I see this as a challenge. I didn't know where this was going to go. Let me just see how far I can take it. And I think none of these things is wrong. I think it's a matter of personal preference. You have one life. You got to live it the way you want to live it and not feel peer pressure. I mean, you might feel it, but I think you have to put that aside and say, I'm going to do it my way. I mean, that's the beauty of starting your own business is you're in charge, and no one can force you to run it any way you don't want to.
What I think is fascinating and what I love about what you just talked about is there is a movement within this niche of 22 million non-employee businesses, and even the ones that are hitting the 7-figure mark. There's a movement of lifestyle entrepreneurs who, they may be okay with $200,000 to $500,000 if that's 90 to 95% profit margin, which it does.
Yes,
there are ones that do exist, and Jason was incredible. He told his story at this meeting that we were at in Toronto on Monday. And he's got a really good niche right now. I mean, it's a high ticket item. Those mastermind talks are not cheap. The tickets to attend are not cheap. And, there is a movement of the lifestyle entrepreneurs as well that just want to build something that brings in enough money for them to do what they want, to travel, work out, and have that dream lifestyle. I love it.
Yeah, it's really, it's interesting because I think we're just seeing more people feel like they don't want to be workaholics. They want to work effectively, but they want to enjoy the time that they have on earth, and I think people are realizing that younger and younger because of the Great Recession. They saw maybe parents get laid off or they got laid off, and they realized, what, these folks or I was putting in all of my time every week pretty much and not having any kind of work and life balance. And look what it amounted to, right? The job was gone and then it's over. And so I think they're looking at their own businesses that way too. That, there's also people There's the whole digital nomad movement, where, location independent businesses. There's parents. There's a lot of subgroups within this movement. People that are like mothers with young children. That's another group who really need a lot of flexibility, but they want or need an income as well. And I think we have the tools now where you can really do a lot from a home. With all the digital tools, you can run your business so effectively in ways that we couldn't even 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
You can almost run it from anywhere with good internet. And there's so many new markets you can tap into. So it's just getting easier and easier. And I think the reinforcement of all those people out there who is just saying, why do I have to work like a maniac every single day of my life? I don't want to miss life. And you're right. There are a lot of people that are like, 200,000 to 500,000 income is fine. Where, especially depending on where they live. I mean, that could go pretty far. It won't go that far in New York, but if you live in Arizona or somewhere with a lower cost of living, you'll be living quite well on that amount. And if you have a high profit margin, you might be taking home the same amount as the entrepreneurs in this book. Which I should make the point. I picked $1 million because I really was fascinated by how people are getting to that level. It is a high revenue mark, but your 1 million might be 100,000. Mm-hmm. Whoever the entrepreneurs has to look at what their lifestyle desires are and their lifestyle costs. So locking into a number, it can be a good way to set goals and motivate yourself, but it's not an absolute.
I love that. You said define what your 1 million is, and it's actually a pretty profound concept, because we found, so I'm in the marketing space and we create marketing messages all the time, and there are clients that I've helped take from zero to $400,000 per month in 2.5 months.
That's awesome.
Well, so where I'm going with this is that sometimes I wanted to really leverage that case study. And so I'll talk about hey, how we took a client from 0 to 400K in 2.5 months. And to be quite honest, it doesn't resonate with many people because it's too big of a concept for them.
Yeah,
so I'm curious to see if you ran into that as well, when you were talking to people or as you were doing your research. Or I don't know if you probably would have run into it because
I have actually.
Okay. Well, explain that.
Well, usually what happens is when I do panel discussions, I've done a few in New York and I have a few coming up. People come up to me afterwards and they're like, Elaine, it was so great to hear from these entrepreneurs, but I'm just trying to get to 100,000. And a lot of times I wind up having lunch with them and talking about their specific business. And there are different leaps in a business. I think, in the beginning, what I found with my business, I went freelance 10 years ago. The first couple of years, I still had the employee mindset. Mm-hmm. And I had to learn a couple of things. One was how to manage my personal finances as an entrepreneur, because if you're used to a paycheck coming in every 2 weeks and your bills are all your mortgage or your rent on that monthly billing cycle, you have to plan to have a big cash cushion so that you can keep reinvesting in the business. You might not need a lot, but you need a computer, you need a phone, you might need certain software in the beginning. You might need to travel a little bit. If you're getting paid late, sometimes by clients, all of a sudden, on paper, yes, you may be making a certain amount, but if you're not making it this month and the bills are due this month, you better have some more savings than you normally do. So learning to really live below your means is important. And I don't mean to say your life has to just be all frugality and suffering. I mean, it's just maybe a 20% lifestyle cut in the beginning so you can build up enough cash to cushion you in case things go wrong. That's very important. I started the business in October 2007. Then a year later, we went into the Great Recession. So I experienced what it's like to do a ton of work. And then all of a sudden, nobody's paying you for 120 days. And you're like, wow, all my clients are not paying me. And what do I do? And you have to be prepared for that. It's not normally like that. That was hopefully an anomaly, but you never know. Things can happen in the marketplace that you have no control over. So there's that. And then there's thinking about, okay, how do I build a business with the potential for growth? So in the beginning, I did almost 100% journalism, which is what I was doing at Time Inc. And then I started getting offers to do content marketing. There was more demand for that. And I thought, well, I'm not really a marketer. But then when I saw what they were asking me to do, which is basically write articles, they were the same types of articles. Content marketing, by the way, has gotten very sophisticated. It's not, they usually, the clients don't want you to write what used to be called an advertorial, where it's just like patting them on the back. They want a reported article that looks like an article that would be a journalism article. So it's actually no different in most cases than what I was normally doing. So that added a whole sidelight. I added some consulting in because people needed content strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And out of some of the articles, I started doing longer form projects and things like white papers. And then I started having people approach me who liked some of the articles they read and say, hey, do you do ghostwriting? I would like to write a book. And then the ghostwriting became another sidelight. That's now a big percentage of my business. And what's happened in my business is, and it probably happened to all freelance journalists, is the work we do has been greatly devalued, unfortunately. And the pay for the work that we do has gone down a lot. But I could be bitter and angry and whatever, but it is what it is. That happens in the marketplace. I wish it was more valued, but it isn't. It's become like writing poetry. So how do I keep doing what I love? I do the other stuff to subsidize it.
Mm-hmm.
And it all kind of still adds up, but you've got to constantly be shifting. You can't be like, well, I'm only a journalist and now it pays less, so I'm just going to stop my feed and get mad, because then you won't be able to stay in business. Then you have to go back into a job. And when you have a successful business, you won't want to.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have wonderful freedom. I have 4 children. I love to do hot yoga. I love to do taekwondo. I go running. I do cycling. I see friends. I like to go into New York and have lunch with other self-employed people that I know. And I have a great lifestyle. I would never want to go back into a job. I get job offers and I say no because I can never imagine that. So you'll want to protect that. And so how do you protect that? It's by building some resilience into your business and your product mix, and also tapping into skills that maybe you don't think of as your primary skills, but are very marketable. So I never thought of myself as doing marketing at all. And I still primarily am a journalist at heart. But when I saw that applied to something else, I could have said, well, no, I'm a purist. I will only do this. I could have said, you know what? This is the way things are going. And I can bring a lot of value in this area. And let me give it a try. And if I don't like it, I won't do it.
That is like so critical, which I want to highlight real quick, is so many people who may be, I'm gonna use journalism as an example, right? Their background as an employee is X. Like, this is what you're hired for. This is what you do. And they don't realize, and they might not see the opportunity that same skill set, while it may be called something different. Like, if you ever want to really seize an opportunity or spot an opportunity or grow, I mean, most people who I've talked to lots of people who don't even realize they want to do something else, but that skill set will apply to something else, and it probably just won't be called journalism.
Exactly. Well, part of it is in corporate America, sometimes you're encouraged to kind of stick to your knitting, and there's a lot of territorialism. And if you start going into another department's territory, there are a lot of political repercussions. So people kind of learn to just stick to what they do and become hyper specialized. But a lot of times what's happening now is companies have stayed very lean since the recession. And even if you are on paper kind of specialized, you're being asked to do other things. So maybe you're in the marketing department and you wind up getting pulled into planning events, or you get pulled into social a little bit. Like maybe you were just doing the traditional media marketing. And now, they do have a social media person, but you work with them pretty closely because you've got to coordinate. You might know a lot about social media because of that. And you might be able to sell that expertise. You might have, the way to figure out if you can is pilot it in a small way. Maybe you add it as an add-on to an existing project that you're doing to just see if you can build some confidence in that. And that's pretty low risk because you're adding it as a little extra. And you'll see how the customers react. If they feel you've done a bang up job on it, then you can start making it into one of your service offerings. I mean, there's a balance because when you're small, you don't want to go into too many different directions either. And there's no cookie cutter that like you should have 3 areas of revenue in your business. You've got to make the judgment calls in real time. And that's part of the learning process and the journey is you try some things, maybe some of them stick, maybe you waste some money on some things. It's not really a waste of money because it's an investment in your education. You do it very low risk and then build upon what you're doing.
Yeah. So I know that we're running out of time, and I wanted to talk about your journey real quick. How long ago was it that you grabbed your first freelance gig that kind of started this road to where you are now, writing the book and you know, and everything that you're doing? Like, when was that first opportunity that came up for you to freelance or get a side gig?
I always did a little bit of it from early in my career on the side a little bit, but the first time I did it full time, I worked for Success magazine, and unfortunately at that time it went bankrupt. And so I was an editor there, and while it was kind of winding down, they said we can use the offices and work on getting another job or whatever. And so I started freelancing a little bit then, and for about 4 months I freelanced full time, and that actually was helpful because I was able to figure out that I could really match my income doing it. I had enough connections in what I do where my business is very much a who you know business. So if you tell other editors that you're out there freelancing and they respect your work, they'll start sending work your way because it makes their life easier. So I built it up pretty quickly, but then I got a job at Time Inc. and it was a wonderful job. Actually, through one of the freelance assignments, it was like, I think I was paid $150 to write this 750-word article, which isn't a king's ransom. But I thought, this is great because I don't know anybody at Time Inc. and I'll at least know one person as a result of the article. And then it turned out she was leaving. And so when I turned in the article, her boss said, Elaine, thanks for the article. By the way, Cheryl is leaving. Do you know anyone who would be interested in her position? This was running the website Fortune Small Business Online, which at that time was part of Fortune.com, which had 3 employees. Now it's become CNN Money, but so I was like employee number 4. And at that time, you couldn't post on a website without a web producer. It was really, the CMSs were very cumbersome. So I had a producer and her whole job was literally posting 1 story a day. I mean, now we laugh at it, but this is how much the web has come along, which has driven the success of a lot of the businesses that I've written about. It's crazy when you think about how inefficient it was, but it got us to where we are today. So that worked out very well. I built it to, with a team eventually to about 800,000 page views a month. And then I went over to the magazine for 4 years, did long form journalism, which I love. And then I went back onto the website. It had, the traffic was at a certain level and I hadn't grown that much. It had changed hands within the company a little bit. And so I was able to build it to 2 to 5 million page views a month, just reflecting in a way how far the web had come, and other strategies that we use. But then along the way, I also started my family, and I had premature twins, and who were in the NICU for 3 months. So I was working from home part of that time while I was at the magazine, and then I had another baby, and then I started to feel like my life was all logistics, and I wasn't really enjoying anything as much as I should be. And so then that was when I went freelance, and it was great. Then I wound up having another 4th child, my son, who's now 8. And so it's worked out beautifully because I really work with almost all the same people. They're all still in the industry, and I do the same type of work as well as a lot of new types of work I would not have done in a job. And so I really haven't looked back. There's nothing, although I loved my corporate career. I was never a person who was, I'll never work for someone else. I actually liked the collegiality of it. I liked working around really smart people and being challenged to always raise my game. You can imagine at Fortune, the people were very, very talented. And I learned so much from my colleagues. But I feel like I got to a point in my career where it's nice to apply that to a lot of different clients and learn from their way of doing things.
I want to ask one last question before we wrap up. Can you point to a spot in your freelance career, in your solo business career, that you realize, like, wow, people are willing to pay this much for what I'm about to do for them? Like for me, for example, it was the first time that I landed an $18,000 gig to write a webinar, and I'm just like, there's something here. right? Do you have that story where it's like, holy cow, like people are willing to pay this much, or like did that light bulb moment or like that aha moment?
Well, it's funny. In my case, because I was the person internally hiring out the work, I knew exactly what the market would bear for it. I mean, sometimes I never really was that surprised because usually with pricing, I'll do my research with friends. So, like with ghostwriting, if I was given an offer for some type of project I had not done before, I would call other people that I felt were at an equivalent level in their career and just say, what do you charge for this? Like, or what would you charge for this? And then I would, after speaking with 5 or 6 people, I would make an educated decision like, okay, well, maybe they charge this, but they've written 10 books. This is my first one. So this is what I'm going to charge for it. So I think it's a little different with what you do because it's more technologically advanced than writing and editing. It's a skill that is, for many people, they would never pick it up. A lot of people feel they can be writers and things like that. So it's not like for an article, they're going to pay you, $50,000 or something like that. There's a certain range for it. And that's where it is. But I think that's very industry specific. But I would say for anybody running a business, it is good to, ask around. That's where I found the solopreneurs are so open because they know what I find is we're competitors in some ways, but there's only so much work any freelancer can do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you can't hoard all the work for yourself, and sharing information freely. Sometimes you wind up teaming up. I actually have a business partner who I have a second business with where we do scalable projects together. We have somewhat similar skill sets, and you could say like on paper we would be competitors, but she's been a great collaborator and allowed me to take on things that I maybe never would have been able to do because they were too big for one person.
And I think that's critical, especially for solo business owners, solopreneurs, is, try not to have such a closed-minded mindset because we need, as solopreneurs, probably the biggest challenge that I see is the fact that we're just alone, right? It's loneliness, and
It is, yeah.
we need companionship, and we need to bounce ideas off of, and so I totally support where you're coming from.
I think we're entering a more collaborative environment in business. The whole crush the competition mentality, it still exists. I mean, especially at the top levels of corporate America. But I think for a lot of people, that's a turnoff. I feel like there's abundance in the world, and there's, not to sound too touchy feely, but I don't feel like there's a limit on the wealth that exists. I think that it can always more can be created. So if you help other people be successful, it's good for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
That all feeds back into the economy. It's just good karma or whatever you want to call it. It's just good. And I think collaborating with other people is part of that. It can open your mind so much. You learn new things, and you can sometimes they have skills you don't have and you don't want to even pick up because it's not your thing, and it just enriches your whole life.
Well, Elaine, we talked about a ton today. I loved our interview. I mean, we started out talking about how, obviously you've got that book, The $1 Million One Person Business, but how I'm just going through my notes here. The average revenue for a solo business is $49,000 and 0.16%.
I love that you did that math. I've never done it. So
0.16 of the 22 million total non-employee businesses ever crossed that $1 million mark. And the number one thing that I pulled out of this is, for anyone who's looking to kind of go into that solopreneurship space, and that is our audience for the most part, define what your 1 million is, because it may not be what you think it is. And so I love that piece. And we talked about a bunch of different examples, like Jason Gaynard with Mastermind Talks, who ironically I just met on Monday, and he's a fascinating guy. And we talked about your journey into how you got to where you are today. So where can people connect with you? Where can people find you? Drop some links, drop some resources so they can connect.
Oh, sure. Well, the $1,000,000onepersonbusiness.com is the website for the book, and there's a contact me box. It's all written out in words, the same title as the book, or they can go to my website, elainepofeldt.com. I'm not going to spell it out. It's in the show notes, but it's hard to spell, so double check it. I'm under that name on LinkedIn and also Twitter. So people reach me all different ways. I am happy to meet you on whatever medium that you use. I'm pretty much on all of them, on Instagram too. $1 Million One Person Business. So please do reach out. I would love to hear from you. I love hearing from entrepreneurs. And it's been such a pleasure to talk with you, Joel.
Awesome. Well, I had a blast, Elaine. So if you're listening right now, please go connect with Elaine and let her know that you heard her interview on Experts Unleashed. Give her support. Go check out her book, The $1 Million One-Person Business. Elaine, thank you so much for joining us today. And for everyone else, we'll see you on the next episode. Take care. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we look forward to giving you the next one. Now, if you want additional trainings and content outside of the podcast, I release exclusive video trainings on my Experts Unleashed YouTube channel. And if you'd like to come hang out with thousands of other fellow experts, join our Facebook group community where we do hangouts and webinars to help support you in your journey. Finally, if you'd like my personal help to develop, launch, or scale your business, contact me directly for private consulting opportunities to see if any spots are available. And you can find all of the information above at expertsunleashed.com.